We are back for another Christian review of regular books, and today we are discussing the Assistant to the Villain series, which is truly one of my favorites. Let's get into it. For those of you who have never seen one of these videos before, here's how it's going to go down. First, I do my regular review, what you know and love to expect from a book review, star rating, my own personal opinion, but I do it all without spoiling the books. Then I get into my Christian review, and that's where I go over the basic pieces of a book that may or may not have a fellow believer or truly anyone wanting to read it. I give more caveats and any more information you may need about these reviews at the video that's pinned at the top of the playlist. Or you should be able to click here somewhere. However, if you are still here, let's go ahead and head into my regular review. This series 100% took me by surprise and by storm. And normally my rule for giving you guys Christian reviews of regular books is that I don't do it until the series is completed and I can give you a full and honest review of the whole series. However, we've already added in a fourth unknown book that's coming out soon, which is going to be called something that I can't remember now. It starts with another A, something to the villain. Anyways, regardless, there's going to be another book coming in the future, and it's possible that there could be even more after that, because I do know that the author is having just a heck of a time writing this and having a blast and is rather successful at it. So then I decided I just wanted to give you guys the content, and then from there I could always update these reviews and give you more reviews when the next books come out. When I first picked up this series, I picked up Assistant to the Villain because I was in a book club and the book club picked this as their book. And I will tell you that I was not excited. I was not super enthralled at the idea of it. I had heard really mixed reviews about this book as a whole, and from a lot of book talkers and other people that really I respected and looked up to their opinion, and they just did not have a good time. So I thought, there's no way I will have a good time. But oh, how I was wrong. This book totally took me by surprise. I had so much fun, and I really did want to know what was happening when it was happening. I also found myself truly at red lights reading the book and reading a couple paragraphs because I did not want to put it down and I wanted to know what happened. I think Hannah Nicole Maehrer is unbelievably talented at making sure that the endings of each chapter are such cliffhangers that you want to know what's happening. And I absolutely was in that mode. I wanted to know what was happening the entire time. There were some other parts of this book that tended to slow down and feel a little bit okay, well, we can move on from that. And so for that reason, I rated this book 4 stars. Then I picked up Apprentice to the Villain, and this book I was also so excited to read. I also love, look at this, okay? So you see that, but then the sprayed edges, isn't that so cute? She did such a good job on these. So then I picked up Apprentice to the Villain, and I was so enthralled by this book. Now I was attached to the characters. Now I was invested. Now I wanted to know what happened. And the truth is that these books read a little bit like the trashy TV of Bravo, which I personally am obsessed with a good fantasy-esque feel. So I really was enjoying myself within this realm of feeling okay, I am now in this series. I now want to know what's happening. I want to be invested in the characters, and you learn so much about the characters in this book. I vividly remember a majority of the scenes that happened in this book. I do not need to do a reread because I was enthralled from beginning to end. And I actually rated this one 5 stars. Now here's what I will say that I find really interesting. The first book, Assistant to the Villain, read a bit in the romance like a YA series, even though the other parts of the story do not read like a YA series. And it's a little confusing because when I first looked it up on Goodreads, when I read it originally, it did say that this was YA, but now I think it says it's adult, and definitely Apprentice to the Villain is adult as well as the other book in the series. So I think that it's probably new adult that we're looking at. You still deal with some of the emotional youngness while also getting maturity in other categories that read more like the 18, 19, 20-year-olds type feel. This book, however, it took me by the seat of my pants and would not let go. And again, I was reading at stoplights. I couldn't do anything else. I was obsessed, and I rated it 5 stars. So then Accomplice to the Villain came out, and I actually pre-ordered this book because at this point, I am now obsessed with the series. I am now invested. I am now cannot wait, need to know what's gonna happen. I am all in. And this book took me 3 or 4 weeks to finish. I struggled through it. And part of me thinks that it was a bit of wrong book, wrong time. But part of me also thinks that this book just had very much middle of a series kind of slumping. It needed to kind of build a lot of story into it. There was still the queen of the quick endings and the wanting to know what the next chapter brings, and then not even having that point of view in the next chapter. So then you're trying to figure out what's going to happen, you know, and you want to get through the chapter you're on so you can get to the next one. But I really struggled with staying invested in this story. And even just as I was reading it, I often found myself kind of looking off into the distance and thinking about other things. I still loved this book despite that. And I do think Hannah's writing is just truly so good, and it's a writing style that I really vibe with and enjoy. But I rated this book 3.25 stars. As I mentioned, the first two books really feel like they kind of go from young adult to new adult, and Accomplice to the Villain very much is new adult style of writing and of storyline development. There's a lot that happens in these characters' worlds that change over the course of this book, and I appreciate the maturing aspect of these characters. But when you get through this book, you definitely want it to be for kind of someone of more mature mindset. Regardless of that fact, I am still invested. I will be getting that fourth book. I will be reading it and enjoying it. And just a note to anyone who's ever interested in potentially doing this on audio, do not. Okay, do not. It's the same narrator each time. I feel like people have tried to explain to Hannah Nicole Maehrer that this is like not the right narrator for these books. It's the way she does the sarcastic, like witty banter that is very common in these books and in Nicole's like writing style that I don't think the narrator captures quite well. On top of that, there are, especially in this third book, there are multiple points of view, and the narrator does the same voices for the females and the males no matter which point of view you're dealing with, which can become fairly confusing by the end of the third book. All in all, I still rave about this series. I will still tell you to read this series. And I will also say just a little caveat that this could be because of my own personal life. You know, it was busy. It was a busy season. If you want to see everything that I'm reading and rating in real time, you can do so by following me on Goodreads. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, and I do have my own YouTube channel. So if you're wanting to see more of my day-to-day life and my reading journey, you can do so by following any of those links in the description box. Now let's go ahead and get into my Christian review. The first category is smut or spice, and the first book, Assistant to the Villain, did have like just some thoughts, but it was very, very, very minor. Like I would almost say it's not really anything there. It's very different. The second book, Apprentice to the Villain, did start to have more thoughts about spice or smut, but again, nothing super descriptive. I still think it was pretty easy to avoid or not worry about. And again, it was more just like what was going on inside of the character's mind. The third book, Accomplice to the Villain, had even more than the other two books. And additionally, I think that there was like actual scenes played out versus just thoughts in their mind. So there is definitely more in here. It's still very mild compared to a lot of romantasy books that I've read, but it's there. The second category is explicit language. There is no explicit language in the first book. I think there's like one word said once. In the second book, there starts to become some minor explicit language, but in the third book, there is more explicit language throughout the book. Now, it's always kind of shocking, even like in the storyline for the character, because it's unusual. However, it's still there. The third category is violence and gore, and there is actually a fair bit of violence in all three of the books. It kind of ebbs and flows throughout the story, and I wouldn't say that everything is explicitly described, but there are some scenes that are just visually could be kind of disturbing. And this is where I think that book, all of the books, should never have been qualified as YA books, because the violence and gore aspect of it is pretty dark, and I don't think it would be appropriate for a teen, especially not a young teen. Additionally, I just want to mention that we do start to have some LGBTQIA members in the Accomplice to the Villain series. There is a relationship dynamic which is between two women. Because this is a fantasy series, it's also the magic system that I wanted to talk about, and there is magic throughout this series. It's not implicitly dark, I will say. It reads very much like a fantasy that is also kind of like a Disney-esque fantasy, right? Where you have like the good witch and the bad witch. Like I think of the Rapunzel movie that came out from Disney, and like there's kind of like a joke on the characters, and they're very whimsy and funny and lighthearted. I feel like these books are like that with the magic system. The magic exists, but it's very whimsical. It feels a little bit like we took all these Disney stories and wrapped them up into kind of a fairy tale slash fantasy. In that way, I don't think the magic system has inherent darkness. However, I will say that these books are about a villain being the main character. And depending on how you perceive that storyline, especially because the villain is a fairly lovable person. On top of that, there's an apprentice or an assistant, and this person is coming alongside the villain to help them in their villainous duties. And so there is some development of those characters. There's a lot of maturing that happens over the course of this series, and I don't know that the villain and assistant you meet in book 1 is really the villain and assistant you meet in book 3. I think they change so much over the course of these book series, which I love. However, you are still dealing with that reality, that it's kind of like, you know, Maleficent, when you watch Sleeping Beauty and Maleficent is the villain, versus watching Maleficent the movie, which is kind of, even though she is the villain, she's a villain in a way where you start to kind of understand her mindset. If that is something for you that feels like I don't want to read that, this series just would not be for you. However, if that is not something that bothers you, then this is a really fun series for so many other reasons. This series is appropriate for anyone aged 16 and up. Again, I think it's the gore that really kind of makes me want to make sure my teenager would be a little bit in their older teenage years in order for me to recommend it, or even into like the new adult phase, which is 18 and up. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can stay up to date on all of these Christian reviews of regular books, plus me and my mom's podcast, The Journey We Share. We do post all the time, and we don't want you to miss a single thing. But on top of the fact that you don't miss out, it also helps us know that the content we're creating is content that you want to see. And because we're a nonprofit, it's basically like a free way to donate to us and kind of help us along our journey to supporting you. So please make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, or even leave a comment down below. And we cannot wait until we see you on the next one.